5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening, YouTube. Melvin Quine Gatery with a video on Dune, third of the trilogy. Ironically, third video of the second movie of a trilogy. And while we have not gotten to the end of it, I do want to have a preliminary idea on what is the theme of Dune. Now, whenever you're dealing with a, quote, great work, it becomes very hard to come up with a single concise theory of what the theme is, because ultimately it depends on what you were paying attention to when you were reading the work itself. So we always want to have our three go-tos, my three go-tos of critical thinking when dealing with media. One, when you have an idea, subject it to the thing test. So, this movie, John Carpenter's The Thing. Most iconic scene, well, there are a few, but it has to do with the blood test to identify who among the survivors is actually a survivor and which of them are, in fact, a thing that is destroyed, that frankly poses a grave threat to the human race because of its ability to assimilate and imitate other people. So when it comes to the thing test, if you have an idea, and in terms of most things, the ideas don't organically arise from you yourself. They are in fact the product of whatever you were going through. And you do want, as best you can, to identify the sources of those ideas so that you can get an idea, so that you can understand where your opinions are being formed, because having actual records of your opinions over time is one of the best ways to see how often you do in fact change your mind, because people do it quite a lot. Second, so your Gam-Jabbar test, very much like Dune, is inspired by Dune. It's this idea of your animal response may lead you to something that is not advantageous for you as a human being and a person. So your animal response, your instinctive reactions to some things may be to, say, kill it with fire. Reasonable, but when you're talking about media, that emotional response means that is essentially conditioned. So why it is that you're conditioned to respond that way, you do want to identify that, and you want to get to a point where, yes, I am emotionally uncomfortable going down a particular line of thinking. However, that is a temporary discomfort. If I just keep running away from it every time I get to that point where I'm emotionally uncomfortable thinking about a topic, I won't be able to actually, do anything or think of anything for myself. I'm just basically having a bunch of things running around in my head. You just have a bunch of things running around in your head, steering you into doing whatever media you're consuming in the moment guides you towards. So, Gam-Jabbar test is really like that sense of, yeah, you're uncomfortable. You're really uncomfortable. And the instinct of just pulling your hand out and going and doing the easy thing is not good for you. In this case, for Gam-Jabbar, you take your hand out of the box, it doesn't end well. 3. So once you've gotten away from just accepting some other conclusion as yours, and then you've gotten away from the emotional handicaps, based on tribalism, based on habit, based on everything else. Once you've gotten around that, where your opinion on what something is just what you saw from videos or what you saw from other reviewers, and instead actually saying, okay, those are what those other people are saying, but do I honestly believe this? Or if I don't believe it, why do I go back to saying something else when I don't necessarily agree with any of these completely? So I don't agree with any of those opinions. If you don't agree with any of the opinions that you can identify completely, then your actual opinion is not any of those opinions, and you're simply avoiding where your emotional investment lies. And so you come to the identity test, where you start having a bunch of opinions that are not well formed, that you have to basically prune away to get to your actual conclusion. Now, one reason that it took so long to do this video is I always like to have some rough idea on what it is that I'm dealing with, so I can have a bit of structure when I get to making the video, and then do some of it in real time. For the theme of Dune, because I'm looking at it from just the movies, and I'm not using, like, remember, the thing test is, the easiest thing with the thing test for Dune is just to use what Frank Herbert said about messianic heroes, except there's a difference. Frank Herbert was really writing this with a small number of people, comparatively speaking. Nothing is a one-person, great man job. It's Frank Herbert and the people who are reading those really, really, really rough drafts that no one is ever going to see, that slowly turn it into what became a classic. So that whole process is what gave us Dune as we know it. From there, we have an adaptation that fundamentally changes because of the decisions made to meet the guidelines of what the human attention span is in a movie theater, what the experience of being in a movie theater is. And so the actual protagonist is changed, the antagonist is changed, and the result is you get a completely different antagonist-protagonist dynamic. And once you have a different antagonist-protagonist dynamic, you end up having a different theme. In this case, I had to realize that my emotional Gam Jabbar, despite the fact that I love the movies, my Gam Jabbar is, Paul is not the main character, yet all of my theses for the theme instinctively centered around Paul being the main character. And he being the ultimate protagonist of the trilogy. Part of me emotionally is invested that he does become the central protagonist in the third movie. However, there is a thing that I just realized. The Bene Gesserit are the focus of the HBO Max series, right? Or the Max series. The Prophecy. They were talking about it while the first Dune movie was being made. As great as these movies are, they are essentially made to get people interested in the Bene Gesserit to watch that series, which leads into the Dune movies, which in turn leads into what goes beyond. Because ultimately, you cannot tell the resulting story beyond Paul in movies because it's just not. It doesn't work that way. You need the space, you need the time and the budget because time in Dune is the most important character. Is time and environments shaping and changing how people interact with each other and interact with themselves. So with that, to get a theme has to do it has to tie in the three core elements of a story. It has to key characters, key settings, and okay, so you have to have a single statement that connects the key characters, the key settings, and the key events that involve involve the interactions of the characters with the setting and environment. So how the characters are changed and change the world that they're living in, and the events that bring it about between those characters. What that means is you would basically end up having this massive spiral of 50 pages of trying to make Paul the main character because ultimately a character that popped up twice or actually asterisk Jamis. So Jamis as a character in the direct narrative of Dune came in toward the end of the first movie and died. His water and all the water that he had obtained was then poured into a ritual cistern that would be used to make Dune a green paradise once again. But the reason I have the asterisk is that this is not the Jamis that Paul killed. This is the Jamis that became Paul's friend in a version of the world in which he could become Fremen. That he would not magically know the ways of the Fremen on his own. He would know the ways of the Fremen because he was taught by Jamis. As such, because he didn't learn the ways of the Fremen on his own, he couldn't be the chosen one. So, Jamis as a friend would be Paul being able to live a life in which he does not become the chosen one. But that path was denied. And it wasn't denied passively in the sense that Paul didn't actually do anything to prevent this from happening. Paul was effectively a minor. He was effectively a child. He was subordinated. He had no authority of his own. Everything he did was through his family connections, as of the point in which we get to the end of Dune Part 1. So the reason that he does not get the option of becoming a Fremen is because he was groomed for destiny. So, Paul being groomed to be the chosen one by his mom is the reason that he has to kill Jamis. Because that fulfills aspects of the prophecy. Jamis was apparently was basically one of their best warriors, and for someone to just come out of nowhere and take out one of their best warriors was a big enough deal that it got Stilgar fully invested in Paul being the chosen one. So basically, having it go to Jamis making the clear rejection of Paul out of pocket when Paul himself could see a path where Jamis does not reject him out of pocket means that there was something that happened. And it was all of the little events that set him up to be the child of destiny, the person who will fulfill prophecies, the person who could never actually be truly Fremen because those prophecies did not come from the Fremen. The prophecies were from the Bene Gesserit. So if the prophecies are coming from the Bene Gesserit, the prophecies were manufactured. The chosen one was manufactured. Manufactured. All of those things were manufactured by Bene Gesserit to serve the interests of Bene Gesserit. That's just the text of the movie. But when we get into a theme, it has to tie together core things. It has to tie together the Atreides, the Harkonnens, the Emperor. So we just have those guys. You have to also tie in the Bene Gesserit, and the Fremen. Into a theme statement. And that took a long time to come up with something, and I had to look at the nature of how someone gets to be at the top of the Bene Gesserit. So how do you get to be the top of the Atreides? How do you get to be at the top of these groups? So the Atreides, the Emperor and the Harkonnens bloodline, right? You get to be the top of the Harkonnen family. Well, you get to be the top of the Harkonnen. To be an Atreides, to be a Harkonnen, to be in the Emperor's family, you have to have a bloodline, and violence, So you basically you have a spot, you take it. You either take out the person above, or you just or just it's handed to you. So you can choose violence, you can choose patience. Now with the Fremen, strength, or better yet, virtue. All of these are based on some form of virtue. So leadership is based on virtue. The virtue of the Harkonnens, from what little we see, is really just being able to build wealth and power. Whereas the virtue of the Atreides this is that's a trick. But what you really want as an Atreides is being able to instill loyalty and trust in the people underneath of you, that they are willing to willingly sacrifice themselves for you. Um, that's wealth. Sorry. That is a non-monetary form of wealth. So it's an unalienable wealth or inalienable. If I can convince people to sacrifice of themselves willingly for me, to provide for me materially, that's wealth. Even because if I can just get people to do that who have no reason doing that, that's a type of power. Now the Bene Gesserit, their virtue is knowledge. Okay. The triangles. Also, the Harkonnens are supposed to all be gingers. The Atreides are supposed to be about the Spartans. It's like the Atreides are based on the House Atreides of the Spartans, who were defined by martial prowess and courage. Hush. Okay. Yeah. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. So the reason that the Fremen have it where you take over by taking out the guy before is you're demonstrating your courage, your heart. It's not just about being physically strong, it's about being a part of a group. And so you need to show heart. Being able to instill loyalty. These are all heart-based things. Whereas the Bene Gesserit, the Bene Tleilax, the Navigators, the Gesserit, the Ixians. The Ixians are the people who build the ships. The Navigators are the ones that are able to pilot the ships. And a lot of the genetic things that people are able to do are cultivated by the Bene Tleilax, or the Tleilaxu. So you have the knowledge-based power system, the courage, honor-based power systems that define that most of the great houses, and then you just have the power, wealth that define the Harkonnens and those like them. So none of that connects to all that's sort of leaning into what's going on with what the theme might be. And so there are all these different directions, but it has to interact because we have to understand, well, who is our main protagonist? Our protagonist is Lady Jessica. Reverend Mother Jessica. Okay. So our protagonist is the Reverend Mother Jessica. And Truthspeaker Gaius Helen Mohaim. I feel like Gaius, as in Gaius Julius Caesar, it's a Roman basis, so the person is born into nobility. So Gaius, and many times you would have like Gaius Julius Caesar. So the first name is really saying where someone falls in the inheritance waterfall. Gaius would be the first, or if they would. I think Gaius is the firstborn. So basically, Gaius Helen Mohaim, like Gaius Julius Caesar, is the heir. So she's inheriting her family's rank and power. So she's inheriting her position. So having the multiple names, so Gaius Helen is her familial name. So Gaius is a Roman name implying rank and inheritance. Helen as in Helen of Troy, meaning when she was young, she was beautiful. So she naturally, and then Mohaim, that I think is, I think that comes from Judaism. I think that might be a Jewish name. Mohaim. I think that might be, there might be a scholar named Mohaim that I don't quite recall. But essentially that's indicating wisdom. So she's got the bloodline, she's got the looks, she's got the understanding. Whereas Lady Jessica, so here's the thing. The fact that she has those three names, whereas Lady Jessica is called that because she has no surname. So she's illegitimate. That she was bred. Her mother was bred with Baron Harkonnen specifically to serve the purpose of reaching their goal of creating a chosen one. So she does not get to have a surname because of the nature in which she was born. But because of her bloodline and the fact that her father was necessary for their project, and that her father, the Baron, was necessary. They needed to get his bloodline to mix with courage through knowledge. So basically, we come back to the Triforce again. But the goal was so Mohaim wanted to control the Chosen One. So she wanted a Chosen One on her terms, and that's kind of ew when I think about it like that. Really ew. But at the same time, the fact that the Chosen One is manufactured by the Bene Gesserit makes it not as easy. However, she wanted a free she wanted a son that she could love. She wanted the Chosen One to be someone that could love and be loved, that could understand. Basically, she wanted a Chosen One. She wanted her son, she wanted her child to be the Chosen One because she loved, because she was in love with Duke Leto. So, with that dynamic of your central antagonism being based around who gets knowledge, who gets power, who gets freedom, I think, and because I didn't go into the whole identity test that I had with myself, but the theme here is Aletheia so Aletheia literally means unforgetting in Greek. It is the process of truth. So, a difference between Latin and Greek is that while both have truth as a goddess, veritas as a word is a noun. It basically means reality. So, veritas is reality. It is a noun. It is a thing. It is a person and place thing. And as an idea, it is the fixed state of the world. It is something rooted. Whereas Aletheia is unforgetting. That it is revealing and peeling back the hidden structures underneath of things. And that is something that is constantly being done because you're always bombarded with experience. But underneath is this hidden world that is driving everything that you experience. And Aletheia is being able to see all of those connections, of being able to peel back all of the layers. So it's unforgetting. And in the movie, they involve a very important aspect of Aletheia. So, anamnesis. So, amnesis is losing recollection. Or more accurately, the negating of memory. So, not mesis, memory, not memory. And removing, taking away your forgetting of memories. So the aletheia of Dune is obtained through anamnesis, in which it is the recalling of that which is unremembered, which is of prior recollections that were unremembered for all of your life until you have had the revelation that leads to anamnesis, which in this case was the water of life. It's how Paul finds out that he's a Harkonnen. It's how Lady Jessica finds out that she's a Harkonnen. It's basically why it is that the Reverend Mothers are running everything, because they know everything. And that's why the storytelling is comforting the people that don't have power. We see that with Gurney. We see that with Stilgar. When they feel they can take refuge from the world in a story, the story that the Atreides can make things right, the story that Paul is the chosen one, and when the chosen one shows up, all the problems go away, and that they'll reach the end of the story. That's why they're not in charge, because they're choosing the storytelling. They're consciously choosing to go with the storytelling, despite the fact that Paul is giving them unforgetting. He's showing them, no, the Bene Gesserit put these stories here. Like, I might be able to do all the things that make me a chosen one, but it's because I'm trained I'm trained to do those things. And it's like, oh, that's great. Then that just proves that you're the chosen one even more, because they're actively choosing the story, and Paul has to ultimately actively choose to unforget, he has to choose that process of seeing things as they really are behind the layers. And that's what makes him worthy of power, is that is willing to go through that process, to keep peeling through that while knowing who he is involved in all of it. So I can't give you all the process and how I got to that identity, but it definitely fits. It shows why Jamis is important, because it's showing that that paths were closed off for him by others. And it may lead to him becoming a means of confronting his mom with her own actions. It could be that she still remains the central character, but Paul becomes more autonomous. And I think we should end up seeing the tragedy of Aaliyah in the sense that her fall in the books is because she does get some aspects of what Paul can do, but because of the circumstances in which she came into being, while she might have the genetic potential to do what Paul does, because of her circumstances and her unique vulnerabilities, she does not get the same kind of outcome despite having the same bloodline. So with that in mind, have a good one. This is going to be my last video on anything besides CFA for some time. I've got less than 3 months left, and I'm going really hardcore with it. Have a blessed one.